was 8 years old the first time I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of my own name being whispered. At first I thought it was my sister playing a prank, but the whisper didn't come from her room, it came from directly under my bed. Daniel. The voice stretched my name, soft and shaky, as if someone's mouth was inches from the floorboards. I froze. My body refused to move, my breath trapped in my chest. For what felt like hours, I stared at the shadows stretching across my room, the faint glow of the nightlight making everything look stranger, sharper. Finally, I screamed. My parents rushed in, fumbling for the light switch. I pointed to the space under the bed, trembling so hard I could barely speak. But when my father crouched and pulled the sheets aside, there was nothing, just dust and toys I had forgotten about. "It's just a dream," my mother whispered, brushing the hair from my face. "Old houses make sounds." You imagined it, I wanted to believe her. But in the silence that followed, I knew I hadn't been dreaming. That was only the beginning. The next night I felt it again. That heavy awareness, like eyes pressing against me from the dark. I lay still, waiting, and then came the sound. A faint scratching beneath the mattress, like nails dragging slowly across wood. It went on and on until my skin prickled with goosebumps. When I told my parents in the morning, they laughed it off. "Probably mice," Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. He set a trap anyway, though I noticed he placed it far from my room. But there were no mice. 2 nights later, the air in my bedroom turned icy cold, so cold I could see my breath puff out in little white clouds. I buried myself under the blanket, shivering, until I heard the whisper again. Louder this time. Closer. "Daniel, come down here." My heart hammered in my chest so violently I thought it would burst. I wanted to run to my parents' room, but I couldn't make myself step onto the floor, not when I knew something was waiting just inches below me. Morning brought no comfort. When I finally forced myself out of bed, I noticed long, thin scratches etched into the wooden floor beside the frame, marks that hadn't been there before. I showed my mom, desperate for her to see, but she frowned, said I must have done it while moving toys around. When I insisted I hadn't, her face grew pale for just a second before she forced a smile. "Stop scaring your sister," she told me. But I wasn't scaring anyone. I was the one who was scared. And deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever was under my bed wasn't just in my head. It was real, and it wanted me. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room anymore. Every night, my bed felt like a trap, the shadows beneath it stretching longer, darker, almost alive. I started sleeping on the couch in the living room, curled up under a blanket, listening to the occasional creak of the floorboards, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. One evening, Mom came to check on me. I could see the worry in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the blanket around me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, for the first time, I heard her whisper my name in the hall. My heart jumped, but when I blinked, she was just standing there, looking at me like nothing had happened. I asked her about it later, trying to sound casual, but she brushed it off with a nervous laugh. "I think you're imagining things, honey," she said, though her eyes darted toward the hallway as if confirming something. That was the first time I realized I wasn't alone in sensing it. Mom heard it too, but why didn't she tell Dad? I started watching her more closely. When she thought I wasn't looking, her lips moved silently, whispering prayers under her breath. Sometimes she would glance at the bedroom door with a look that said she knew something I didn't want to understand yet. Then the objects started to disappear. My favorite toy car vanished from my bedside table one night. I swore I had put it there myself. I searched the room, panic creeping up my throat, and finally, after what felt like hours, I saw it slowly sliding from under the bed, as if some invisible hand had pushed it there. My heart hammered against my ribs, and a cold chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just the toys, books, my notebook, even a glass of water once. It all vanished, only to reappear beneath the bed. I tried setting traps, leaving notes, even placing my notebook in a drawer, thinking I might catch whatever was doing it. Every time, by morning, it was under the bed. Always under the bed. Mom didn't say anything when she noticed it herself, but her expression spoke volumes. Her jaw would tighten, her lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't want Dad to see, didn't want him to know. It was our secret, though I didn't feel comforted by that. Instead, it made the fear heavier, more suffocating. Some nights, I would hear whispers coming from the bedroom, soft and almost hypnotic, like someone calling me closer, closer to the darkness. I'd shake my head, cover my ears, but the voice persisted, weaving into my dreams, following me even into the living room. Mom would come in quietly, calm me, but she never acknowledged what we both knew. There was something under that bed, and it wasn't harmless. Every night my fear grew, as did the tension between what I knew and what I could tell. The room itself seemed to pulse, breathe, wait, and every time I peeked under the bed, I felt its presence, watching, patient, deliberate. It wasn't just a shadow, it wasn't just imagination. It was something alive, something aware, and it was just waiting for the right moment to strike. The nights grew longer, heavier, each one sinking into a darkness that felt almost alive. My heart would pound against my chest the moment I closed my eyes, a drumbeat of fear that refused to be silenced. The whispers under the bed no longer stayed hidden in the corners of my imagination. They had grown bolder, insistent, calling my name with a voice that sounded eerily like mine, echoing with every syllable. Sometimes it would call softly, almost tenderly, like a lullaby. But the warmth it pretended to carry was a trap, and I knew it. Other times the voice was jagged, cruel, dragging the syllables into something grotesque, impossible to mistake for anyone human. I refused to go to sleep in that room. Even the small comfort of my blankets felt powerless against what lurked beneath. My mother noticed the terror in my eyes and tried to soothe me, but I could see the worry shadowing hers. The same dark worry she never spoke aloud. Late at night, I sometimes heard her whispering under her breath, murmurs that trembled with fear. She never admitted to my father that she too had heard the whispers, that she too had felt the icy draft that snaked across the floor like living fingers. She wanted to protect him from the truth, but the truth was breaking through our carefully constructed walls of denial, seeping into every corner of the house. Objects began to vanish in the most impossible ways. A small toy car I had left by the bedside would disappear in the morning, only to be found lodged beneath the bed, its paint scratched and smeared as if it had been dragged across some unseen surface. A favorite book would lie on the dresser one moment, and the next be shoved under the mattress, its pages trembling. I tried to tell my parents, but my words sounded ridiculous, childish. How could anyone believe me? And yet, every night the disturbances grew more frequent, more violent, until even my mother could no longer ignore them. Then came the night my father decided to look. The fear in my mother's eyes was palpable as we approached the bed together. I clutched their hands, my own cold and trembling, knowing instinctively that what awaited us would not be a simple trick of the imagination. My father bent down slowly, shining a flashlight into the shadowed abyss beneath the bed. What we saw froze the blood in my veins. A figure crouched there, too dark to be human, a black silhouette with glowing, molten eyes that seemed to pierce through us. Its head turned, mimicking my terrified voice, calling my name in that same cruel, twisted tone. It laughed, or something like laughter bubbled from its throat, wet and hollow. My mother screamed, and I felt the floor tremble beneath me, the room swallowing our courage in a suffocating wave. The figure did not move like a living creature. Its movements were jerky, inhuman, but precise in the way it mirrored me. Every sound, every expression was a warped imitation, a perverse reflection of the terror it fed upon. I wanted to run, to pull my parents away, but my legs refused to respond. The room had become a cage, the air thick with cold and dread. And for the first time I realized that whatever this was, it had been patient, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself in all its horrific clarity. The nightmares weren't dreams anymore, they were real, bleeding into our waking hours, a dark presence that no one could deny. I still remember the first time I saw the change in my father. It started subtly, his patience thinning, his voice rising over the smallest of things. But soon, it became something darker. There were nights when I'd wake to the sound of him pacing in the hall, muttering words that made no sense. The warmth that had always filled our home disappeared, replaced by a suffocating tension. The air itself seemed heavier, thick with an invisible weight pressing down on us. I knew in my gut that it wasn't just the stress of work or life. Something was inside him, something feeding on fear, and it had a name. It had found a way in. At first, my mother tried to shield us, insisting that he was just tired, just human. But then came the nights when the shouting escalated to throwing things, doors slamming and windows rattling as though the house itself were alive and echoing the chaos. My father's eyes, once warm and soft, now glinted with something cruel, distant, like he was no longer entirely himself. And every time he screamed, I heard it. The same distorted whispers my sister and I had been hearing. The presence had taken hold. It was my mother who finally broke, who admitted that she couldn't fight it alone. One rainy afternoon, she returned home with a man who smelled of incense and old books, his eyes sharp and unsettling. He introduced himself as Father Malachi, though the hint of fear in her voice betrayed that he was more than a simple priest. He was a man who studied things most of us couldn't understand. She explained everything, every shadow, every whisper, every vanished object. He listened silently, taking notes in a worn leather journal, occasionally muttering prayers under his breath. That night, Father Malachi walked into the room where the bed sat, the center of all the chaos, and his expression darkened. Kneeling, he traced the floorboards, his fingers brushing against hidden grooves as if reading them like Braille. Then he looked up at us, eyes wide, voice low and trembling. "This ground," he whispered, "it is not ordinary. Decades ago, a child died here, a child who never left." The words hung in the air like a curse made tangible. I felt the room shift, a sudden chill rushing through every corner, and I realized that the shadows under the bed, the whispers, the fear, they were all connected to that long-forgotten tragedy. Mother's hand gripped mine tightly. "How do we stop it?" she asked. Malachi shook his head slowly, his gaze never leaving the bed. "You don't just remove it. You must understand it. This is anger rooted in grief, bound to the earth itself. Every step you take must honor what was lost." He warned us, his tone grave, that the presence would not relent easily. It had waited decades for attention, and now it had found vulnerable hearts to torment. That night, the house felt alive in the worst way. My father's figure loomed in the hall, muttering fragments of words that made no sense, and my mother and I huddled together, clutching each other like fragile shields. Father Malachi began his ritual, chanting and sprinkling incense, moving slowly around the bed. The shadows writhed as if aware, retreating just slightly under his presence. And somewhere, deep beneath the floorboards, I could swear I heard a child crying, soft, desperate, and sorrowful. The revelation hung over us like a storm cloud. Our bed had been built on cursed ground, and until we confronted what had died there, nothing would be safe. The past had reached forward, touching our lives with cold fingers, and I knew the descent into darkness was far from over. The storm hit harder than usual that night, Rain pounded against the windows in furious sheets, and the wind howled like something alive, clawing at the corners of the house. I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to the uneven rhythm of the storm and the faint scratching that had become my nightly torment. But tonight, there was something different, something urgent in the whispers. They called my name, soft but insistent, weaving through the roar of thunder, dragging me toward the shadows beneath the bed. I froze at first, convinced my mind was betraying me. But then the voice changed, coaxing, almost pleading. Come closer, just a little closer. I could feel the floorboards beneath me vibrate as if the house itself were responding to the call. My fingers clenched the sheets as my body obeyed what my mind screamed against. I lowered myself, inch by inch, toward the edge of the bed. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else, yet the whispers remained steady, relentless. From somewhere above me, the light flickered. One moment, the room was bathed in the pale glow of the ceiling lamp, and the next, darkness swallowed every corner. I shivered, a chill crawling up my spine as the air grew heavier, thicker, almost tangible. And then I felt it. The first tug, subtle at first, like a gentle nudge on my ankle. My stomach dropped. My instincts screamed to resist, to retreat. But it was too late. The next pull was stronger, like icy hands dragging me downward into the yawning black beneath the bed. Stop! Get away! I screamed, my voice raw, but the sound barely escaped my lips before it was swallowed by the shadows. Then came the pounding on the bedroom door, my mother's frantic knocks, my father shouting my name, but even their voices seemed distant, distorted, as if coming from a tunnel carved straight through the storm itself. The bed frame creaked violently as if the house were alive, bending and twisting under some unseen force. Lightning flashed, revealing the sight that would haunt them forever. My parents burst into the room, just in time to see me half-dragged beneath the bed by a mass of darkness that writhed like smoke. My small arms flailed, desperate for something solid to hold on to, but it was like trying to grab water. The shadows seemed to pulse with hunger, their edges sharp yet fluid, and from within I could hear my own voice, mocking, twisted, echoing every word I had screamed. Furniture trembled, drawers flew open and slammed shut, and the ceiling groaned. The air was electric, each spark of the storm outside mirrored by the flickering lights inside. My mother lunged forward, her hands clutching my tiny body, pulling me back with every ounce of strength she could summon. My father yanked at the bed frame, teeth gritted, muscles straining as the darkness hissed and twisted around us, its intent clear. It wanted to consume, to erase, to replace. Finally, with a scream that tore through the storm, the shadows recoiled, dissolving like smoke in the wind. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling, soaked in sweat, while my parents held me tight. The storm outside raged on, but inside silence fell, an uneasy, brittle silence. The bed sat there, innocent and still, but I knew the darkness had not left. It had only paused, waiting, watching. Even now I can feel it beneath me, the memory of those icy hands, the echo of my own voice calling back from the shadows. And I know, deep down, it will return. I thought that stormy night would be the last I ever saw of my childhood, that the darkness under my bed would finally claim me. The air was thick, almost solid with dread, every shadow twisting into something malicious. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, dragging me toward the void beneath the bed as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. My parents screamed my name, their voices a frantic tangle of fear and disbelief, but I felt powerless, my small hands reaching out for something that wasn't there. And then, a light. Not the harsh glare of electricity, but soft, gentle, almost otherworldly. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The shadow that had been lurking, mimicking my voice, paused. It froze, as if startled. A presence appeared from the darkness, not menacing, not cruel, but small, ethereal. It was the child whose soul had been trapped beneath this cursed bed decades ago. Its eyes, though pale and shimmering, held a calm I hadn't expected. I blinked, unsure if I could trust what I saw, but the spirit didn't attack. Instead, it moved toward me and extended a tiny glowing hand. A warmth spread through my chest, a sensation I hadn't felt since before fear had taken over my nights. The whispers stopped. The cold receded. The shadow I had been terrified of seemed to shrink, losing its hold on the room. My parents, frozen at the doorway, watched in disbelief as the small figure hovered over the bed. I could hear it whisper, not in malice, but in soft, clear words meant only for me. I just wanted to be free. Suddenly, the bed began to shake violently, wood cracking, mattress splitting, as if the house itself were exhaling a long-held breath. Flames licked the corners of the bedposts, not to harm, but to cleanse, and the air smelled of smoke and ash, releasing the weight that had suffocated our home for so long. I felt the spirit brush against me like a breeze, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving behind a lightness in the room that made the walls feel less oppressive, the air easier to breathe. The bed, once a prison for something evil, now smoldered quietly, releasing the last remnants of its dark secret. My parents rushed to my side, their faces pale but relieved, arms wrapping me in trembling hugs. I whispered, It was protecting me. My mother's eyes glistened as she realized the truth. The child beneath the bed wasn't a monster but a guardian, trapped by pain and fear until we unknowingly helped set it free. As the last embers faded and the room fell silent, I felt a tiny hand on my shoulder, warm, fleeting. A whisper tickled my ear, soft and grateful. "Thank you." I exhaled, tears streaming down my cheeks, the terror of years dissolving into a profound, almost holy calm. That night I finally understood. Sometimes the darkest places hide not just fear, but also the chance for miracles.